Good morning, church. We are continuing in our series on relationship killers. And today, we're going to talk about negative thoughts. Think about it. Oftentimes, before things goes bad in a relationship, before you get hurt, or before you get angry, or before you argue with one another, it all begins in the mind. It begins with a thought. It begins with a negative thought about the other person. And it happens all the time. For me, one of the times when it often happens is when I'm driving. Before I continue, I want to apologize beforehand. I'm going to make enemies with about 70% of the church this morning. You see, what happens to me is this. Oftentimes when I'm driving on the road, and when I come behind a car that is driving very slowly, or the driver doesn't seem to know where he's going, and I'm just stuck behind that driver, I get very upset, very irritated, very agitated. And the minute when I meet such a driver, the first thought that comes to my mind, don't be angry with me, but the first thought that comes to my mind, this is a lady driver. And after that, if it's not a lady driver, the second thought that comes to me, it must be a very old man driving the car. All right? That's just the thoughts that come into my mind, the negative thoughts that come. One day what happened was this. I was driving once, and I came behind this car. It was one of those trunk roads, those old trunk roads. And you couldn't have, it's difficult to overtake. You can't overtake. And this person is just hogging the road and just can't move. And behind me, I was just thinking to myself, if you don't know how to drive, don't drive. If you're too old to drive, don't drive. Get your son to drive. You get somebody else. Why do you need to drive and hog the road and do all that? And at one time when I was doing that, I was driving behind this car. And finally, I got a chance to overtake. And when I overtake, I speed up next to the car. I just quickly want to take a look, and just to see who the driver is. I was right. I won't tell you whether it's the lady or the old man, but I was right. And at that moment, I was just looking at him. I was so irritated. He was like, huh? And then just at that moment, the Lord convicted me. He said, where's your compassion? How do you know that maybe perhaps this guy, he's driving, it's not because he wants to. Maybe because he had nobody else in his life to help him move from point A to point B. Perhaps he himself didn't want to drive. Maybe he is having cataract or glaucoma or whatever, and he doesn't want to drive. He doesn't want to go on his own. But because there is no one else in his life to help him, he has no choice, and he's struggling there to make it from point A to point B. And here I am, judging a person, getting angry with a person, getting irritated, making an enemy with a complete stranger. For what reason? Because of negative thoughts. And that's what happened. Very often, when someone says something, when someone does something that somehow we just don't understand, straight away our minds goes into overdrive. And we condemn the person in our mind. We think the worst of them. We judge them. We get angry with them. And by the time we finally come face to face, we already have all this negative perception about that. We just get so angry and so upset. Even before we speak to one another, the relationship has been broken. For example, we come to church. And when we come to church, suddenly someone is sitting in a place where you normally sit. And before anything happens, your mind starts going to overdrive. Why is this fella so inconsiderate and taking up my place? Or sometimes you're in the office and a colleague is late in handing up a certain report. And straight away you pass judgment in your mind. This colleague, a very lazy one, irresponsible, never do his work. Or sometimes when you're at home and you're not husbands, you're waiting for your wives to get ready, and your wife is delayed in coming, in getting down, in getting dressed. And straight away you're thinking in your mind, why this woman so vain one? Why this woman cannot just keep time, cannot be punctual? Or sometimes wives, you come home and then your husband forget a certain chore, forget to do some housework in the house. And straight away your mind is, why is this fella so insensitive? Why is he so irresponsible? Does he not love me? Does he not care for me to do this small little thing? And before we realize it, we have condemned a person in our minds, and we are just so upset and so angry with that person. That's why Philippians 2 verse 2 says this: fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. In lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. In other words, don't judge. Don't think negative thoughts about people. You see, it is so important for us to do that. You know why? Would you write the first point of your notes is this? Is that your head is connected to your heart. Let me say again. Your head is connected to your heart. What you think in your head, your heart will feel. Let me read it to you. Matthew 6:22 says this: the lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. You see, friends, if you notice, we don't see with our eyes, We don't. We actually see with your brain. Your eyes are just optic lenses that just let light pass through. What happens, the light comes through, hits some retina and some sensors in your eye, and those signal goes to your brain and it forms an image in your brain. And so what happens, we actually see with our mind, with our head. And what the Bible is saying is this, that if your mind is a lamp of your body, if your mind sees things as good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your mind is always seeing things in the negative, everything will be negative. Whatever is in your whole body, your whole relationship, everything in your life will be seen as negative. You see, friends, your mind is connected to your heart. If you are thinking angry thoughts, you will feel angry. If you are thinking jealous thoughts, you will feel jealous. Because how you think will affect how you feel. And that's why Proverbs 4:23 says this: guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. In other words, friends, you need to guard your heart because it will determine everything else in your life. And how do you guard your hearts? By guarding what your mind thinks. Because what your mind thinks will affect your heart. There's a story told of this father. His son was in the hospital because he had a road accident. And there he was waiting for the doctor to arrive, the surgeon to arrive. And he was waiting and the surgeon was late. The surgeon has not arrived. And the father was getting so frantic. When the surgeon finally arrived, the father was so angry. The father shouted at the surgeon, "Why are you so late? How can you be so irresponsible? Don't you know that my son is dying and here you are and you're just so late coming in to operate on my son?" The surgeon looked at the father and said, "I'm sorry, I was not in the building. The minute I got the news, I came as soon as I can. Please let me go into the operating theater to save your son." Then the father was like, "You are just so rude. Just went in and just run in and you just think a simple apology will solve this problem." And the surgeon don't care, just went in and did the operation. After a few hours, the surgeon came out. The surgeon looked at the father and said, "Thank God, everything went well. Your son is safe." And say, "But if you have any other questions, you can ask the nurse." And the surgeon just went off. The father got even more angry. See, how can this surgeon be so irresponsible? Can't he just even stay for 5 minutes to explain to me what's the situation of my son? Can't he even just stop and just tell me what is happening with my son? At that moment, the nurse looked at the father and said, "Sir, yesterday, the doctor's son died in an accident that was similar like your son's. And this morning when we called him, he was at the burial ground attending to the son's funeral. He rushed over the moment he got the call. And now that he has saved your son, he has gone back to continue burying his son." You see, sometimes, we tend to pass judgment. We tend to think the worst of people because of the negative thoughts. So what do we do then, friends? Would you write the next point of your notes? Seek to understand the heart rather than to judge the performance. Let me say again. Seek to understand the heart rather than to judge the performance. See, a lot of times we see a person, what he does, and we judge a person based on their motives, their attitude, their character, all because of what he does. But friends, a lot of times, we may not know the true heart of a person just based on the actions or the performance of that person. But we are so eager to pass judgment on a person's heart just based on their performance. For example, sometimes when some person passed by us, and the person we know each other, but somehow he didn't smile at us. And straight away, we pass judgment and say, oh, he must be snobbish, he must be rude, he must be arrogant, maybe he looks down on me, that's why he doesn't smile at me. Or maybe he's upset with me. And immediately we pass judgment based on a person's performance without ever seeking to understand the heart. And that's what we do. We just allow our minds to take over, and because our mind is connected to our heart, we pass judgment so quickly just based on a person's performance. That's why the Bible reminds us to think of others better than ourselves, to think of them better. And let me just read again to you in Philippians 2:3 it says, but in lowliness of mind, let each of us esteem others better than ourselves. Esteem others highly. Think of people better than how you would judge them based on your own standard, on how you would judge them based on your own attitude, your own. Think of people better. That's why James 1:19 also reminds us, but let everyone be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. You see, quick to hear is not just talking about listening to what the person says. No, we're talking about being quick to understand. Quick to understand a person, to understand his heart, to understand the intentions and the motives of a person, and to be slow to speak and slow to anger. In other words, slow to react, slow to pass judgment, slow to think negatively of a person. But instead, be quick to understand, to learn to understand the heart rather than to be quick to pass judgment on the performance. Just because you see a person doing something, and you think you may know the heart behind it, but many times it may not be the case. I remember this incident happened in a church, not in KL Wesley, but in another church, when there was this member who came to church early. And he noticed that the ushers were scrambling because somehow that day there was not enough ushers. And so this man was just saying, I see them so pitiful that they are just so running around because there's not enough ushers. He decided to help. And so he just began to take some bulletin and just started passing it out to people who entered the church. After a short while, another usher was looking at him. And that usher looked at that person and then he was complaining, saying, who is this man think he is? Come and do our job. He thinks we're not doing a good job, is it? He thinks we cannot do our work, is it? That he has to come and interfere with our job. You see how easy it is for us to just think negatively when a person has good intentions. And we need to understand. We need to realize that it's just so easy to happen. And why does it happen so easily? Well, would you write the next point of your notes? The reason it's so easy for us to misunderstand people is because we are all very different people. We are all very different people. We all come from different worlds. Even we come from different planets or different universe. Because from the way we are brought up, the values that we carry, our perception of things, we are just very different people. And that's the same goes with our family members, with our spouse, with our neighbors, with our church members, with our colleagues, and because we are just so different in the way we think, in the way we have the values in our hearts, the way we perceive things, we are just so different. When our actions collide, we tend to conclude and think wrongly about each other. You know how different we are? Let me give you an example. When Shelley and I, my wife and I, we first got married, one of the things that we had a big conflict over was how to hang clothes to dry. Let me tell you, I'm an engineer by training, right? And for me, when I hang clothes to dry, what's the purpose of hanging clothes to dry? To dry the clothes, right? And so for you to want to get the clothes to dry, you need to hang the clothes in such a way that you will have maximum airflow in between the clothes and maximum sunlight exposure on every article of clothing. And so when you have a pair of pants, for example, that's very thick material, what you need to do is you need to open up the pants so that it looks like a very big fat man, so that there's enough airflow going through it. And when you have a lot of clothing, you will tend to put the smaller articles in front and the bigger ones like blanket and bed sheets at the back, so that the sunlight will give maximum exposure for the sun hitting the clothes. Now, my wife grew up in a very different environment. And for her, what is she comes from a very conservative environment. And what is very important is the way things look, the aesthetics of things. And so for her, when it comes to hanging clothes, when you can't hang a pants and make it look like a big fat ugly man. No, it has to look neat and tidy, even if it means being close together and the air can't flow through the pants. And t-shirts, when you're hanging it, it has to be right side in, out, and it cannot be the wrong side out. It has to look exactly and how you will hang it. But what's most important is this: article of clothing that you don't wear and show people when you are wearing them, you shouldn't show people when you are drying them. And so all those small little articles of clothing that people shouldn't see, she likes to hide it behind all the big blankets and bed sheets and towels. And you know what I'm talking about? To me, those things are made of cotton. Those are the things that suck water the most. Those are the hardest to dry. And so if you want to dry it, those are the things that you need to put in front for the whole world to see. But my wife said, no, those are the things that you have to hide behind blankets and towels because the world cannot go and see those things. And you see how easy it is for conflict to happen, for negative thoughts to come and go, because we are just so different. We're just so different in the way we think, in the way we behave, in the way we perceive the world. We are just so different. Now, friends, multiply this with everything else in life, with the food you eat, with the way you walk, your body language, the way you speak to one another, the things you do, the habits in life, and you multiply that with people who are even further from you, your neighbors, your church members, your colleagues. And you put all that together, you wonder, why is it that we think so badly about each other? Why is it that we can't understand each other? Why we think so negatively about each other? Because people are just so different. And if we keep having negative thoughts, when someone does something different from what we expect, we tend to think the worst of them. But instead, if we learn to understand the heart, and not just try to judge the actions, but we learn to understand the heart, then we begin to see things differently. Friends, let me assure you this. Nobody wakes up in the morning with the desire to make life miserable for the other person. Nobody does that. All right? Husbands, let me tell you, your wives don't wake up in the morning and start planning what are the things she can nag you with the whole day. Wives, remember, your husbands don't wake up in the morning and think and plan how he can irritate you the whole day. They don't do that. But it's just through the actions that happens throughout the day and the negative thoughts that we have that we tend to think that way. And most of the time, it is with good intentions, with the right heart that things are done, but because we are from different worlds, we interpret them differently and it causes tension. So we need to seek to understand the heart. We need to understand each other's heart. Then only can we start thinking rightly about each other. So now what do my wife and I do? Well, we still hang clothes together, yes. But you know what I do? Simple. Right now, nowadays, I just take the clothes, get them ready, put them inside out, and I pass it to her. She will hang it. But that's how we work it out. Because that's why we're trying to seek to understand the heart rather than just passing judgment on the performance. So how do you correct this? How do you correct this? Because we tend to judge the performance rather than heart. How do you correct this? Well, would you write the next point of your notes? Train your mind to think rightly. Train your mind. You see, friends, your mind needs to be trained. Just like everything else in life, our minds also need to be trained. And you see, if you're always having negative thoughts about people, it is because our minds have been trained all these years to think the worst of people. And the reason we think so negatively about people is because we tend to project ourselves in the other person's life. Now let me explain. You know what? It happened one time, when my wife and I was talking about a person, and we're just thinking about why the person did such things. And I came up with an explanation about how rotten that person is. And my wife looked at me and said, you can actually think of such things about a person. I said, yeah, because I'm smart. Then my wife looked at me and said, no, it's not because you're smart. It's because you're just as rotten as that person. Which is true. You see, friends, when we try to think about a person, we try to judge why a person does something, what we normally do unconsciously is this. We are projecting ourselves as that person. And we are then judging, if I were that person and I was doing that, what is it that I mean? What is it that I intend to? And so actually what we are judging or what we are seeing is actually how rotten we ourselves are. Let me give you an example. Let's say we see someone walk past us and the person never smiled at me. And then now I'm getting upset because he never smiled at me. And so what I do is I project myself as that person. And I imagine if I was that person and I passed by me and I didn't smile at me, the reason I don't smile is because I'm upset with me. There must be something that I did that irritated me because I don't like me. That's why I don't smile at me. And then now I'm looking at that person and I'm also passing the same judgment. So now you are not smiling at me is because you don't like me. But in reality, I'm making that judgment because when I don't smile at people, it's because I don't like them. And so in reality, what I'm judging is not the other person's heart, but the evilness in my heart. And that's why Jesus says in Mark 7:20, he says this, what comes out of a man that defiles a man? From within, out of the heart, proceed evil thoughts, adultery, fornications, and murder. And so in other words, the things that we judge about a person, all the evil and negative we judge, a lot of times, it is coming from inside of us. And we continue to feed that negative tendency. Each time we think negatively of a person, we continue to feed that. We continue to reinforce that in our hearts. And that's why when we see someone does something negative, something that we don't like, we straight away judge negatively. And so because of that, what we need to undo this habit is we need to train our minds to think positively rather than to think negatively. We need to train our minds to think otherwise. And that's why Paul reminds us in Philippians 4:8, it says this, friends, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue, if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Meditate. You see, friends, what Paul is saying is, as we continue to meditate on positive thoughts, on things that are noble, things that are pure, what we are doing is we are cleansing our hearts of these negative seeds. We are cleansing our hearts of all these negative thoughts. But it takes time. You see, because all these years, we have been filling our hearts with negative thoughts. We've been filling our hearts with bad seed. And now suddenly, we want to start thinking good about people. It takes time to switch. It takes time to adjust. But we need to start thinking good thoughts. We start thinking noble thoughts, pure thoughts. And then it would slowly, our minds will change. But it takes time. I still think negatively about people. When I come, especially on the road, I still think negatively. But you see, friends, while waiting to train, while our minds are being trained to think positively rather than negative, while waiting, would you write the next point of your notes? While waiting, shorten your response time. Shorten your response time. Friends, I still think negatively about people. When I come to the road, sometimes I see a car in front of me, straight away I still come to the mind, it must be a lady driver or a male driver. An old man driver. But the moment those thoughts come, I will tell myself, hey, no, I shouldn't think that way. No, I do not know no person. I need to change my mind. So friends, you may not get rid of negative thoughts completely, but to train your mind, learn to shorten your response time. Learn to shorten how long it takes for you to get rid and to change that negative thoughts. For some of us, it may take a few months to change that thoughts. For some of us, it may take a few days. Learn to shorten it. To shorten it. That the moment the negative thoughts come, we switch. The moment that idea comes, we switch. And how do we do that? By practicing. By training ourselves that every time a thought comes, we need to switch. It's like these baseball players, baseball, the favorite American pastime, baseball. Baseball players, those who are holding the bat, they need to have a very fast reaction time. You see, when the ball is thrown at you, the ball goes at about maybe 90 to 100 miles per hour. And for a baseball, for the baseball player, for him to hit that ball, he needs to have a very fast reaction time. Because at 100 miles per hour, from the moment the ball leaves the hand, and for you to hit it, it's a split second. You need a split second reaction. And in order for the good baseball players. You see, the amateur ones, their reaction time will be slower. But the really professional baseball players, their reaction time is faster. And how they train and improve their reaction time is this. Is that they train by increasing the speed of the ball. So what they do is they stand in front of a machine that hits the ball at maybe 120 to 130 miles per hour. And they train reacting to a ball that flies at 120 and 130 miles per hour. So that when they are really in real life situation, when they are in a competition and they are fighting a ball that is hitting 90 to 100 miles per hour, their reaction is much faster. Similarly, friends, while we are trying to train our mind to think positively, the problem is we have been thinking negatively all this while. And all this while we have been sowing negative thoughts in our mind. And now, as we have been sowing negative thoughts, now these negative thoughts are growing. And even though we are sowing good thoughts, the negative thoughts are still growing, and they are now growing. We need to keep sowing good thoughts until all these negative thoughts have grown out and the good thoughts start growing. And it starts by us training to increase our reaction time, training to improve our reaction time so that we can respond faster. The moment a negative thought time, we need to switch our mind and switch it to a positive thought. So friends, this morning may I encourage all of us. If we're serious about relationship, let us start to improve the way we think about one another. Not just by judging their performance, but by looking at their heart. I just want to close with this video about how easy it is for us to judge people, to think negatively without recognizing the true intent of the heart.
จะไปไหนก็ไปไม่มีที่นอนให้ อะไรจังวะอุ้ยมึงเยี่ยวหน้าร้านกูเหรอไอ้เป็นออกไป
มันไปทำอะไรให้ปลานักหนา
มองหายเหม็นแล้วสิโอ้ยมันไม่อยู่แล้ว
Hallelujah. Yes, friends, that was an extreme situation. But how often in our lives, whether it be our husbands, our wives, our parents, our friends, our neighbors, that we pass judgment too quickly, that we think too negatively of people. May I encourage you this morning, friends, to train our minds, to think of others better than ourselves, rather than to pass judgment so quickly on people. Let us pray. Wonderful Jesus, wonderful Savior, mighty God. Lord, help us to realize how different we are from one another. And that each time when we want to pass judgment, help us to realize that what we are passing, what we are thinking may not be true because we are just so different. And help us to understand how different we are. Help us to understand the other person's heart so that we can truly know the heart of the person and not just the performance of that person. Lord, I just commit my brothers and sisters unto your hands. Lord, may you help us, Lord, to be people who judges the heart rather than merely the performance. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. Amen.